Good morning, everybody. I hope you're having a blessed day and a fantastic summer, and that the sun is shining many blessings upon you. And today I hate saying this. We're going to have to figure out a better intro. I don't like saying today I'm going to talk about, but until then, today I'm going to talk about connecting with your ancestors. So, and the earth, because it's kind of one and the same. So, you see a lot of videos are like ways to feel witchy or ways to connect with your paganness or ways to feel more like you're connected with your own spirituality. Lots. I just watched several videos on like 10 ways to feel more witchy. So they all pretty much say the same thing, and you can go out and watch them. There are some really fun ones. I just found this new lady from, I assume, Great Britain, but I don't know. I shouldn't make assumptions. She has an accent from somewhere on the other side of the ocean. But, so, when you start to look for ways to connect with your pagan spirituality and your witchy ways and to feel more connected to that, there's a lot of, you see set up your altar, grow a plant, wear a pentagram, and these are all great. But they're all, just like with most beginning things, they're more on the superficial side. Wear your pentagram and learn what it means and spend time with that energy. And that's I've been practicing paganism. I had a spurt when I was a kid where I started going to church, but, I have pagan parents. So aside from that little bit of time, I've been pagan my whole life, and I'm still every day discovering something new about the pentagram and that energy. So wear it, learn it, be with it. I have one tattooed on me. It's just part of you. It's just part of your practice. Yes, that's great. But it's more, just wearing your pentagram or lighting incense or carrying an altar or doing those things leaves something to be desired, I guess. And so here's one of those things. And let's talk about connecting with your ancestors. And, the first and easiest way is to learn about your ancestors. Ask your grandma about her grandma, see where your family came from, do your genealogy, whatever its thing. However you feel drawn to look into your ancestors, do that. Research your ancestors, think about your ancestors, and who they were as people and what they did and what they felt and what they experienced. Trace your ancestors back to before Christianity. And find out what they did practice. And if that calls to you, follow that. But that's not the only ancestors that you have. You also have the ancestors of your past lives. So you can do some past life regression work and think about who you were in your last lives and what cultures impacted your soul, because every life impacts your soul and leaves an imprint on your soul. And you see with each generation, it's not just like the blending of, we have more multicultural communities, which is very true, but we also are more multicultural in ourselves, and that in each life you are reborn, and you were not reborn in the same color, in the same place, in the same language, in the same culture, in the same religion that you are in this world, in this present moment. You experience life differently. So start to learn about those ancestors. But also think about the ancestors that walked on the land that you live on. Because the earth that you live on is what you are connected to. It is the energy that you walk on every day. It is the world that you live on, the ground that your feet dig into. The dirt that gets under your fingernails is the same dirt that got under their fingernails of these people who walked the earth before you in this place. And so that's 3 different sets of ancestors that you have to connect with. And each one can bring in a different aspect of wisdom into your world and into your practice. And, I challenge you to start to think about those things on a more mundane level. and not just on some grand philosophy that, oh, my ancestors were Pictish and they walked the mountains of Ireland, and there's this grand noble thought with the staffs and the flowing kilts and but that's awesome. But in reality, they dug their farms, they hunted they worked hard, they survived. And I think that that's an aspect that we often fail to look at when we start to work with our ancestors, is that we put them on a pedestal and we honor them as such, and we forget that they were real people just like you and me. They had the same challenges that you face. They lost love, they suffered injustice, they fought for what they believed in, or they sat quietly and waited on the sidelines, or wherever they sat in that place, but they suffered through those same kind of challenges that you suffer through now. They had to worry about feeding their family and surviving and doing all of those things to honestly a much more difficult scale than we do now. I often laugh because, like, I'll be working in my garden, and my husband will have already rototilled, so the ground will be really soft, and I'm working in the garden picking out rocks, and this is easy, and I love gardening, and I'm thinking about it, and then I just remember that 4 or 5 generations ago, 6 generations ago, I would say 4 generations ago, there was no rototiller. You had your horse and a plow, or you had a shovel and a stick. And I imagine that our ancestors look down on us and are like, these spoiled, rotten little turds. It's so easy. What do they know about suffering? What do they know about hard work? Because our ancestors did so much to make it so that we have this easy life that's full of all of these modern conveniences that oftentimes we don't even realize the blessings that we have. And so we forget, because we're putting our ancestors up on this pedestal like, oh, these great whatever people. And then we're like, oh, life is so easy. And we forget that it didn't used to be so easy. Even now. So there's going to be like, life is hard. Yes, life is hard. Life is hard now. Life is hard then. But the things that make your life hard now take away electricity and running water and heat and rototillers and cars, and keep all those same other issues. Social injustices and messed up people in the world, and you love somebody that you can't be with, and your children never listen to you, and the list goes on and on. All of those issues, your ancestors had the same issues. All of the emotional turmoil, and my aunt said this, and my uncle doesn't like me anymore, and my kids are this, and my mom is that, and blah, blah, blah. All those things were still there. They just didn't have all of, hot water. Sorry, it always just makes me laugh, because I look around at people who are like, oh, I'm suffering, and then as I connect with my ancestors and I spend time with my ancestors, I'm like, we have it so easy. I honestly don't feel as though I have the right to ever complain, and that I should be foreverly grateful for oh, thank you, ancestors. Thank you for everything that you've done to make sure that I have it this easy, that I can sit here with my camera and record this cool movie, and then I'm going to instantly put it up on the World Wide Web and send it out into the world, and be able to communicate with people from all around the world, and do all of these things that your ancestors could not have even imagined. I mean, some of them, but those who were imagining airplanes and talking through magical devices were thought to be crazy. They were shunned. They were whatever, and it's not. So, as you connect with your ancestors, and you're doing something, this is one of my, it just helps me to be more present with them. Just like in the garden, when I'm doing my dishes, or when I'm doing something else, and I think about my ancestors, and I think about how they would have had to have done the dishes. And, eating food. This is a big one for me. I love food. I love eating food. I'm a nutritionist. I have a science degree in that. This is what I love. I love cooking, all of that stuff. Now, I love saying this story with my friends and my family, and they probably all heard it, and they're like, we don't want to hear this story anymore. Cheese. Everybody who loves cheese. Do you know where the first cheese came from? Your ancestors were killing cows, and they got this baby cow, and they opened up the baby cow's stomach, and there was this stuff inside, and they said, somebody eat this. Let's see what it is. And I just imagine them being like, you eat it. No, you eat it. No, you eat it. Somebody's got to eat it, okay? I don't know why I think they would have this. Or somebody just walks over and says, that's good. But that's where cheese comes from. That was the first cheese. And our ancestors were eating these things because they wanted to survive, and they were exploring the world in this new and amazing way, and there were so many new foods to try, and there were so many beautiful, and also so many gross things and poisonous things and things that you shouldn't eat, and all of these experiences that our ancestors went through. And so now when we're like, oh, don't eat food like this or don't eat food like that, your ancestors were going to eat whatever they could eat. They were not vegetarian. They were not whatever. They ate when they could. They ate as much as they could. When they found a good source of food, that's what they ate. And, but it's experiencing food from that different perspective and thinking about what it would be like to taste a food as a person for the first time. Like the first person to taste a food. And I know that seems like a whatever, but that's one of those ways that you can experience. Think about how your ancestors, when you bite into that apple, okay, the apples they were a lot more sour back then, but think about the first sweet apple. They were like, oh, this is amazing. Think about the first date that was ever eaten. Like, that was like a holy food back then because it was so sweet and it was so good and it preserved and it did all of these amazing things. I mean, my mouth was watering thinking about being the person to taste these foods for the first time and thinking back to our ancestors all the way back, because you have to remember that if you keep going back in your line of ancestors, we all came from the same cradle of earth in the same place many, 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 many millions of moons ago, and coming out of that place and going out into the world and experiencing life for the first time through those is mind-blowing. Okay, the things that our ancestors experienced, the activities that they went through, being the first to do things. Now we talk about, oh, this person was the first person to do whatever. They're the first person to fly to the moon or whatever. But think about our ancestors and that every single one of them had some kind of experience at some point in your ancestral line. That person was the first person to experience something, the first person to see the ocean, or the first person to step onto a mountain, or the first person to see a volcano. These experiences are in your ancestral line at some point very far back. You just have to begin to connect with that energy. So as you go through your everyday life and you're looking for ways to connect with your spirituality, this is a key way to start looking at life like, how would my ancestors have done this? And not that you need to go out and do that. I'm not saying get rid of your rototiller and live without electricity. I'm saying just think about that. And then think about the gratitude that you have for those items. I'm so thankful all the time for electricity because it's amazing. And there are ancestors along the line who helped make that happen. And now you have that gratitude. Just even saying thank you, ancestors, for making it possible for us to have electricity and houses and homes and roads and cars and all of these things that we have now. Thank you. And taking that moment to have that gratitude. You don't have to light a candle. You can, but you don't have to. You don't have to toast and do some big thing. Save that for your rituals. But on a daily basis, you can take that moment to say, wow, it must have been crazy. Here's another gardening thought. If you go back to before grocery stores and back before we had refrigerators and back to when you were literally farming your land and eating what you had, come March, April, there would have been very little fresh food. And then come June, those first strawberries or, those early peas that you pick from your garden, squash, these would have been like the joy that you would have had for that first fresh fruit or vegetable come spring, late spring, even like spring onions or whatever it may be, something fresh would be so exciting, and the joy that you would have for that would be amazing. And then I remind myself that if my garden now was back then, I would be starving, because we wouldn't have had food. Like I had squash that was left throughout all of winter, but really butternut squash and acorn squash for 3 months really puts it into perspective on how grateful you should be that we have these modern conveniences and farmers who do this, and grocery stores and all of that stuff that happens, and for all of our ancestors that brought that into volition and made that a reality. And you know, you can be like, well, not everybody has an ancestor that did that. Yeah, at some point you had an ancestor who in some way participated in making this world what it is today. Even if that was being a friend to somebody, you know, who did something big, or being a supporter in some way, that ripple effect of each life reaches out and changes the world. No matter how minute it is, it always makes a change. And if you go far enough back, you have an ancestor who in some way impacted the growth of society and to give you what it is that you have now. And those are the ways that we can show our gratitude, is that recognizing that and seeing that and honoring that. And if every day you take one moment to be like, how would my ancestors have done this? Wow, that would have been really hard. Thank you, ancestors, for going through that and learning that and having that experience so that you could make something better for the next generation. And bringing that into your practice can help you connect with those ancestral energies, and then also help you connect with the earth, because the earth retains all of those information. I do find it easiest to do ancestral work while I'm in my garden. I can like active meditation while I'm gardening, and I think back to ancestors and people of the past and how they experience. But when my hands are in the earth, I feel that energy even more. And so don't think that you have to like sit there and be like, in order to get that meditation. Sometimes that works, and sometimes that'll bring you clarity and whatever, but sometimes you need to have your hands in the dirt. Or another time I find it's really easy to connect with our ancestors is looking up at the stars. In ancient times, there was somebody in the community whose entire life was dedicated to tracking the stars and the moon and the sun and the shift of the earth and all of those things. Their whole life, that's all that they did, is every day they looked at where the sun was and the stars, and then they told the village, they said, soon it'll be the equinox, or soon it'll be whatever. You see all these people who are like, you don't celebrate the the solstice until the 24th because Shakespeare said so. No, I'm sorry. Midsummer's Night's Dream is not some like whatever. That's very modern piece of work and has nothing to do with paganism. They just kind of rotated it around like that. Our ancestors would have celebrated on the day that the sun aligned in such a way, or the moon aligned in such a way, and someone's whole life would have been dedicated to waiting for that moment to say, this is the moment. Hold on just 1 second. The children are awake, so I'll have to wrap this up. Anyways, take that time throughout the day to think about your own ancestors, and to think about the ancestors that made everything possible, and to show gratitude for that, and to say thank you, and to be mindful of that, and to think about the conveniences that you have. And this can be a great way to connect with your ancestors, and the earth, and the energies that are all around you. And as you think more about that, you open yourself up more to that, and then those things will come to you. So you will get more ancestral knowledge come to you through dream work or meditation or whatever it may be, or you'll get those answers from your ancestors when you seek them. I love getting sewing answers from my ancestors, because I'm like, how would I sew this? And then I'll think and contemplate and take a moment, and then I'll get that answer, because you know what? Somewhere in your ancestral line, many of them were sewing, because, well, that's face it, everybody was sewing. But those answers are there, and the more you think about it and open yourself up to it and recognize it and honor it and create that bond, the more those bonds will work for you so that you can call on that information and connect with that information. And if every day you at some point think, I wonder how my ancestors would have cooked this. I wonder if my ancestors pulled these same weeds, because you know what? They did. So, without any further ado, I'm going to say thank you. I hope that your ancestors bless you with the many visions to help you connect and further your growth and practice. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask. Send me a comment or whatever. Find me on Twitter, Phoenix Rising, and yeah, I'm here and I'm available to answer your questions and talk to you and do things like that. So don't forget to like and subscribe. I'm a little all over the place. I just have so much going on in my brain today. Like and subscribe and come back and check it out. See the other videos. And I hope that everybody has a blessed day and that you enjoy the rest of your Tuesday. We will talk to you soon.